quantum mechanics, and it's all about finding the truth. And I think that's where it comes down to, which is the truth. And it sort of tends to get us into a lot of trouble all the time. So you need to be careful what questions you ask me, because I'm going to give you the straight answer. And then the appropriateness of that answer is misunderstood by yourself. So for instance, if I was to say, this has not been done good, it doesn't mean that you're not good. It just means this work that you've done was pretty terrible. But there's a process driven there, which is everybody needs to understand when they do something, surely. And then they can sort of move forward from that. So for instance, with me, I was very much different when I was a child, and I learned from scenarios. So I have a sense of almost like a library of stories I can come out when somebody asks me a question, or if somebody wants to know something, then I'll interpret that into an analogy that I've used before, and I know that works because I've not been shouted at or hit, so that works. Whereas I throw away stuff that don't work. So if somebody's offended, I think, okay, that doesn't work for me, and it doesn't work for certain people. And then there are other people who are just what I call Aspie friendly, which are people who just get on with it and find it. I suppose they find it quite amusing in some ways. But yeah.
Thank you. So, pros and cons of neurodiversity now?
Yeah, within tech.
Yeah, within tech, okay. So I guess I've talked about some of those things, you know, kind of so far, that kind of pros for sure are the just a different way of thinking, different way of approaching things. We talked about hyper-focus, but with the balance of let's make sure that people aren't being taken advantage of for that. And, you know, I think that again, we talked about stereotypes, so I think there's a common misconception that neurodiversity means introversion, and we know that's not the case. You know, so I guess with however somebody's neurodiversity presents itself, I think there's if we work with that person individually in the right way, there's a way we can use their strengths and, you know, get them away from doing stuff that they might not want to do. So, you know, not every role in our business, for instance, is a client-facing role. So if you are naturally introverted, then that's fine. We can use talents in a different way, kind of thing. But I guess cons. I guess there's. I know certainly from some of our neurodivergent colleagues, some people, and again, this is. I think someone touched on it as a stereotype before in terms of empathy. It can present itself in different ways. So some of the cons might be if somebody is less empathetic. Some other people might read that, as Rob was saying before, well, they're not feeling me, they're not understanding, they're not appreciating how I feel. But that, as Rob was saying, that's not the case. You know, it's just the way things present. So I think it's just, for me, it's knowing the person and the individual, and there's no kind of, in terms of pros and cons, there's no right or wrong answer, it just depends on the person, I think. So yeah, that'll be my very convoluted view of that, sorry.
I'm going to have a go. I think it's diversity. I love working with neurodiverse people, I love spending time with neurodiverse people, because of their talent of thinking otherwise, seeing the world in a different way, but through their eyes, in a completely logical way. It's like I was talking about, you know, the design lab that we've got in the thing, and it's like, well, this is the way you do it. Obviously, I'm getting the feeling that you have that sense of assuredness as well when you see a problem, that this is the way that you do it, and probably frustration that other people also can't see that. So, technical's good. I love the creativity actually that comes from having those people that think otherwise, that will disagree with you, that will see the problem, the situation, the context in a completely different way. I think the challenges for me, whether it's at home or at work, is communication. And I don't mean lack of understanding, I mean communicating, properly communicating, speaking, listening properly, taking time actually to think about the context and meaning that that person individually is trying to get across. So fostering that atmosphere in the workplace takes time, it takes patience, it takes experience, it takes people, I think, with a particular passion. You've got to want difference, I think. The best workplaces, when it works best, is that people in that team embrace difference, embrace diversity, and embrace people that think other than you. Otherwise, the wise others.
Definitely. A lot of the work I do in diversity in general, I think a lot of people see the benefits of having diversity, not just within protected characteristics, but like diversity of thought, and can agree that you maybe get better outcomes that way. It doesn't always mean that it's comfortable. So one of the things I said at the start about making people feel safe is for a lot of people, it's very natural for you to have an affinity to people who are like you. If they're from where you're from, you've got a shared, like you just gravitate towards them. You're like, okay, we've got a shorthand, and we're going to get on famously because we support the same football team, or we went to the same school, or we, whatever it is, because that's the way our brains are wired. We go, okay, there's one of us. If there's somebody who's not an us, and there's difference there, there's effort. There's effort, like you were saying, to understand, okay, so what does this mean? Or I didn't see it that way. I don't know how you got there, because I don't see that. So there's effort there. So my big ethos around this is, one, easy doesn't always equal better. I think a lot of people, the natural inclination with feelings is you go, this is easy, this must be better. That's how unconscious bias happens. I speak for myself solely about unconscious bias training. I think obviously there's a place for it, but for the most part it's unconscious. So like once you've had it, you kind of like, okay, great. So there's a reason those biases creep in, and it's because you go, okay, this feels natural, this must be good. Easy doesn't equal better. The second thing is, to go into a period of uncertainty, your brain needs a logical, rational reason as well as an emotional one, so your stories and your stats. And actually, you're willing to put up with a lot of discomfort if you think that on the other side of that, there's going to be something worthwhile. So Ray Dalio has a concept called first and second order consequences. Quite often, an action will have a direct consequence, but that consequence also has a consequence. So a really good example of this is if you eat something, your favourite food, and lots of it, it's delicious, but unfortunately for most of us, the most delicious food is not necessarily the healthiest for us. But if you go to the gym and you do hill sprints, I mean, you feel ghastly afterwards, don't you? It's awful. You go and you go, I'm lifting heavy things and my muscles hurt and I'm out of breath and I'm sweaty and I've got to get up early or I've got to get home later. But if you feel like that's going to be worth it in the long run, you're actually willing to put up with quite a lot of discomfort for that. So it's about actually understanding that there are lots of pros, but we shouldn't shy away from the cons, actually, and that there might be a little bit of adjustment in terms of making sure we're putting people in the centre and we're listening to what their needs are. It might actually be uncomfortable at times, not just challenging other people, but also being challenged and actually, having someone disrupt your way of thinking and go, oh, well, that's not what I meant, or I hadn't thought of it that way. But it's possible, it's doable, we do it all the time if you're willing to sort of look past that. So I think it is important part of the conversation to actually think about what we gain from leaning into discomfort, because easy, as I as I say, isn't always better.